Hey everyone, we are here with Luca, DeFi lead at Oasis. He'll be doing a talk on enabling DeFi mass adoption through privacy. Once he starts talking, can you guys just confirm in the chat that you can hear him like usual? Thanks. Luca, you have to start speaking for them to confirm.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
You can start with your intro.
Hi everyone. How's it going? Thanks for having me. This is great. My name is Luca and I'm the DeFi lead at Oasis. Okay, great. Thanks for responding. Thanks for checking. Am I good to go?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Amazing. Thanks. Yeah, cool. So I'm very excited to be here and it's great to talk about how DeFi in general can be expanded. The idea today is to understand where DeFi is today according to our point of view and according to what we're doing, and at the same time thinking of what are the ways to expand it. And I love to explain how Oasis Lab thinks about expanding DeFi by adding privacy and scalability to what's there today. So my name is Luca. I'm a product and go-to-market person at Oasis. I am responsible for the DeFi expansion, so I lead the DeFi efforts that we do. I also try to write some blogs around what I think the intersection between what we're doing at Oasis and what the space is looking for should be. So, and as a personal characteristics, I'm generally very open to receiving feedback and having interesting conversations. So I always encourage people that talk to me to come to me with like whatever type of feedback they have. I always appreciate very helpful conversations. So let's start from seeing where DeFi is today. Let's call it for a second the first generation of DeFi, assuming that there are waves that people participate into. I think everyone would agree with me when I say that the first generation of DeFi has been focused on protocols and primitives built for crypto people, built by crypto people for crypto people only, and has been a very rewarding game for miners and traders. Um, the main component of this DeFi has been really to be completely public, but at the same time bounded by the Ethereum throughput. So what does that really mean? When we think of the main components of Ethereum, and which is the main network where DeFi is happening right now, we can totally see how the transaction speed and the transparency of the network are completely affecting what the network is, how DeFi is actually performing. So on the transaction per second, what is happening is that miners are looking at the network, spamming the network often, and the main goal here is to like increase the transaction fee so that they can capture more money. Again, nothing against that, but the point is always understanding what DeFi should be doing and what it's actually doing. On the transparency side, what's seen as a great advantage of the network at the very beginning was really like having the ability of keeping all the transactions public and having the ability of observing what other people were doing, like the balance sheet and all the other components that are generally kept private in the traditional space. So what is indeed happening is that again miners and some traders are looking at the mempool because of this ability of respecting full transparency and using that component of transparency to their advantage. They're observing the transactions, they're seeing what's happening, and they're offering higher fees to copy the same transaction. And the side effect of this also ends up in higher transaction fees for everyone, which means slower network at the same time, and also means that fewer people can participate. And when you can expand this thinking of very high transaction fees that are a result of low TPS, low transactions per second, and transparency on the network, you also start understanding why the yield farming and all these crazy interest rates happen to be live on Ethereum because it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation where only who can get super high returns is interested in participating in the system. Only who can indeed offer these super high returns can attract people to the network given the fees. So it's something that is strongly limiting the participation of people in DeFi. But let's step back for a second because I think it's important to contextualize what we're doing. So when you think of the broader space of the internet, you have this first situation where when internet came, it brought connectivity. Again, here the idea is where is DeFi? How does DeFi really fit the bigger picture, excluding the early adopters that are strongly pushing the industry forward? So again, internet came, brought connectivity, so a lot of traditional businesses moved online. And then the second wave was actually the intelligence, where the cloud brought this ability of having much more powerful and sophisticated algorithms executed basically like for everyone. And when mobile came, the third layer was bringing this layer of ubiquity to the actual network and to the actual infrastructure that was already there. So the connectivity by the internet and the intelligence by the cloud, and now we also have ubiquity by mobile. So what comes next? There is one layer that is clearly missing in the web, which is stop for a second and think how freely the information flows on the web. If I want to send an email or if I want to send whatever bits of information, I don't really know anything about the recipients on top of the address. I don't really have to know anything there. But if I want to combine money and data or just money, if I want to add money to the equation, this starts becoming a problem. So it's pretty clear how the best guess around what the next layer should be about on the internet is actually this idea of exchanging value, attaching data and money at the same time. So really the ability of programming money and data is the new layer of the internet stack, which is another very interesting way to say that what we have right now is a financial system that is based on status, wealth, and geography. But what we really need, based on both all the story that we know about unbanked and how expensive is not to have access to certain financial services or not to have access to different levels of different financial services at the same time, is paired with the expectation of what the next level of the web is going to be. So again, what we really need now is no longer what I just shown, which was this system based on status, wealth, and geography. But what we really need is this system based on programmable, composable, and transparent rules, where potentially everyone that has certain components and certain characteristics can actually join and put their money at the service of other people or borrow money because of other people having access. So like all the participation in this new financial system should be programmable, should be composable, meaning all the services should be able to be integrated and should be also transparent for what it concerns the rules, not for what it concerns the personal businesses that people are pursuing. So think for a second, here I'm borrowing someone else's definition, which I thought extremely helpful, simple, and interesting, which is imagine this global open alternative to the financial system that you use today, right? And think of a new financial system that is not based on few entities regulating what you can and what you cannot do, but imagine a system where really everyone can access with nothing more or like little more than just a smartphone connection, just a smartphone with an internet connection, sorry. This is pretty powerful because you start understanding how on one side, again, you have the story around how internet should evolve, how the exchange of information should be paired with the exchange of value. And on the other hand, you actually have this situation where you have a lot of people who cannot really join the financial system. And joining the financial system is not a binary thing, like either I am there or I'm not, but it's much more related with what products do I have access to, what information do I have access to, and when, and what do I need to make to make my next bet, to make my next investment, to make my next deposit with my money, and so on and so forth. So all this intro, which covers a lot of topic, and I'm very aware of that, is to say that DeFi has been finding a lot of traction on one side of the DeFi that is not really what DeFi is meant to be. And so here, really, DeFi for its next evolution should ask itself, am I going to solve the needs? Am I going to satisfy the needs of a few self-motivated traders, which of course are very important because they're pushing the industry forward, or I want to create a new financial system for the 7+ billion people in this world. And that's why at Oasis, we try to design our network with both perspectives in mind. And everything that the network is proposing, and everything that the network will be pushing for will be actually driven by this idea that we want to satisfy the 7 billion people while also respecting the needs of the early adopters. So when we go to market, when the Oasis network is launched, which is not really far from now, we're talking about weeks. The value proposition of the network, especially in DeFi, is really around two things: the scalability and privacy. So scalability to expand the usability of DeFi, and privacy to really expand DeFi beyond traders and early adopters. So the ability of executing many transactions that are also complex transactions, not just like simple P2P payments, by supporting the execution of complex and parallel paradigms, which we're going to see a little bit more later, paired with the ability of keeping information private in the sense that it's controlled by the user, will actually enable a lot of new use cases that are not possible today. The main one being the reputation or like a credit system based on under collateralization, and the protection of the sensitive information, which also clearly protects the commercial interests of participants. So just to give a little bit of I wanted to add one slide on what actually are these benefits of the Oasis network in a little bit more detailed version. And when I think of the benefits here, it really boils down to the ability of running these private smart contracts, which means that the actual inputs and sometimes the outputs as well can stay private. At the same time, we don't reveal the state of the the actual state and the transaction details. At the same time, we leave developers the ability of keeping the data public and confidential. So privacy, we're not a privacy coin, but we add the ability of running this private smart contracts, and the application can decide what part needs to stay private, what part doesn't need to stay private. We still offer high throughput, as we saw before. The ability of customizing runtimes is extremely important because developers will be able to build the application on the runtime that they prefer. And then also we introduce this notion of this ability of tokenizing the data, which is, okay, data flows in the web, and this is true, and this already happens, but the ability of reducing data to some level of units that can be computed, that can be exchanged, and can be quantified, is extremely powerful. We're going to see an example later of how this materialized in something that can be extremely important for bringing the next generation of users to the DeFi industry. And last here is secure computing, which eventually enables all the characteristics. So what Oasis is doing in DeFi is really about the definition of private and scalable DeFi. And here I spent some time thinking of how really privacy can change DeFi, and what kind of information would actually stay private in this vision of this private and scalable DeFi. So those are just some examples. They're not meant to cover the entire set of benefits that we can bring, but the idea is let's give the audience some more tangible examples. So in the private lending, again, the initial and final balance can stay private. The direction of the transaction can stay private. Same thing in the private automatic market makers and DEXs. So you have this swap pair, the swap amount, and the contributor's identity can all stay private, and so on and so forth. And this goes from like private stablecoin, private oracles, private payments, and private dark pools. We are building great examples on our network. We are also encouraging the community to do so. We're like partnering strongly with the community to enable these great examples of product that have already shown some level of privacy need. This is an example more concrete on how the potential CDP will look like. So in the lending space, you would have without privacy, the actual transaction data, such as like the method and the payload, would be revealed. So you would know if you're minting or borrowing tokens. In this case, if you're lending or borrowing tokens, and you would also know the amount. With us, you don't know what the method will look like, and you don't know what the payload will look like. So you have this like string of encrypted data that you don't really know what belongs to, and it would be impossible to reverse. It has been really impressive for Oasis to see how many companies in the space are thinking that privacy will be the next generation of innovation that is going to be brought to DeFi. We have built partnerships with really the main players in each category, sometimes even more players in the same category. We're clearly expanding this picture. This is just a snapshot of what we have. On our channels, we have all the partners that we've built, all the partnerships that we've built, and we're keeping expanding the same. On the Uniswap side, which is like the decentralized exchange by definition, we're working with an external company. And through this slide, I want to give an example of what's possible for the people in this audience that want to collaborate with us. This external company called Second State, they just launched a Paratime, which is a parallel runtime executed on our network, and they ported the contracts of Uniswap on our network. It's EVM compatible, so it takes nothing more than bringing the contract to the Oasis network, and it's going to work with like very minimal or almost zero effort. And again, why this is important? Because it solves some of the problem that like Ethereum is causing to layers, such as like to applications such as Uniswap. So for instance, when you consider this idea that the data should stay private, if I don't know what the if I don't know what the movement is, and I don't know what the swap pair is, and I don't know the initial balance and the final balance, like the state, I can really avoid manipulating the price of certain pairs. At the same time, even if I'm an observer of what's going on in the mempool, I can no longer stay there and wait for a big transaction to happen and then simply copy that transaction by offering higher gas fees in order to get first in line. I'll simply don't have that possibility, and I don't even have that incentive, because the transaction scalability will actually enable this transaction to be executed really fast. So we are seeing here how both privacy and scalability actually go together, and they're not different pieces of a network. I mentioned before that a super important piece of what we're building has to do with data. It's not just bringing privacy and scalability to DeFi, but it's also thinking of what is the next generation of DeFi and what components should be there. In the traditional financial system, when you go to your bank or to whatever institution, whenever you provide your history, either they rely on your data points or the data points that you offer, or which is the most frequent case, your information is already living somewhere, which could be like the FICO score or alternative sources of reputation. They already collected all this information for you, and they build something that they're able to show all your information in one place. So this should be somehow changing, but the way to make this change is understanding what happens with the data. So right now, data lives in certain databases that are generally not organized in maybe like in a customer-centric view, but they're often organized by type of data set. So you buy it, and then you can do what you want with that. Now, let's imagine a different situation, which is when the data is produced, it's immediately tokenized, which means it's put in this like black box. It's putting in this capsule that is owned by yourself. It's owned by the user, which is also the data owner in this case. Why this is important? because when you start thinking of multiple data points that form your identity, you can imagine a new situation where these different data points are just um, small tokens that you can give or remove or revoke access to. And even in the case that you give access to, thanks to our technology, thanks to what Oasis is enabling, you can allow some level of computation on that token without actually revealing the token itself, the data itself, to the data consumer. So for instance, you can start thinking of situations where multiple data sources are actually linked to your capsule. And when you're applied to a loan or when you're applying to something that requires your data, you can actually like a certain risks model can be built on your data without necessarily you having to, or without necessarily you having to reveal your data, or without a third party company having to build one credit score that is should be accepted by everyone. And this is exactly what I was talking about. So that's the best way to describe this in a very simple way. So think that now, all of a sudden, instead of being a wallet on a blockchain, you can actually have a capsule, and this capsule is a combination of constant like new tokens that flow in from different data sources. You can imagine like Plaid, you can imagine Experian, you can imagine your Touch ID, you can imagine your bank statement, you can imagine like all these data points that go into your capsule and are tokenized the second that they receive, like even before receiving access to the capsule, they're tokenized and then they flow into your capsule. You are the owner of this capsule, and let's say that tomorrow, whatever lending service, whether centralized or decentralized, doesn't matter at this point, they'll come to you and say, I want to build my own credit model on your data. Can you give me access to your data? If you say yes, your privacy is respected. So the data is never flowing directly to the lender, but the credit score, the credit model, the risk model will flow to the data, do the calculations, and only return an output, which could be yes, no, which could be an interest rate, which could be like something else that the company cares about. But the company will never walk away with a series of data points that you have produced. So all of a sudden, we shift the conversation from traders in DeFi to a system that everyone, including large institutions, will be able to access somehow if and only if the user, who is the data controller, wants that. So all of a sudden, we can take the DeFi principles no longer to a small set of traders who are interested in certain components of what DeFi is meant to build or to bring, but they can go into this um, incredible like place where everything is composable and everything is queryable. So essentially, for that, you can enable this responsible data economy, which means that the data can be tokenized, the control can be given to the user, and then incentives can be created to actually share the data when this makes sense. So all of a sudden, the data becomes an asset, no longer something that is owned by few companies. And as every other asset that you have, you should be able, you as a user should be able to like stake this data, to sort of invest this data, invest this asset. Someone else can go and do something with the data. So, and now all of a sudden we have created this market for tokenized data, which is very similar to a lending protocol, but no longer for money only, but for like the entity that is actually lent out is your tokenized data. And the entity that is borrowed on the other side, it's still your tokenized data with the only property, with the unique property that money cannot be ubiquitous. You cannot lend your money twice, but data can, right? So all of a sudden you have a new asset that can generate an infinite, that can be actually like lent an infinite number of times and can generate an asset for you. So all of a sudden, this data can become a factor of production that you have, similar to others that are used to build other goods. And you are the owner of these data points. I actually wrote a blog post that explains this a little bit better, which is this ability. It speaks about this ability of programming data and money and introduce this knowledge of the data market yield, the data market reward. You can find it here. I created this like shorter link. And that basically concludes my presentation. We'd love to hear from you. We love if you want to partner with us, if you want to integrate your service, or simply share your feedback. We are always happy to have conversation. That's my Twitter. We are also very active on our protocol community. So I want to thank you, and I want to see if there's any questions here. Thank you. Okay, so there is this question from Marina. Thanks a lot. And the question is, how do you make sure that after your private oracles screw up, they don't just come back with new wallet ID? So first of all, we are like, I'll give you two answers. So the first one is that we don't really build oracles ourselves, but we work with leading players who are trying not to screw up, because there are so many instances of that oracle that are like run and perform that by the time someone figures out some like ways to exploit that, then their product becomes like always stronger. And there are concrete examples of this that happened in the past. So that's like the first thing that I want to say. We, as a personal philosophy, we try not to reinvent the wheel at each layer, but we're trying to work within like best in class in each industry in order to do so. Now, the second part of this is that, yeah, it's true that even without the oracle screwing up, you can actually have two identities, right? One identity for your good actions and one identity for the bad actions. That's definitely possible, and that's possibly the biggest limitation, or like the main reason why no one has figured a reliable identity solution for the blockchain so far. And just as a reminder, when we speak about identity, we really mean two things. The first is identity, so proving that you are who you say you are. And the second one is that there is some level of completeness that shows that everything that you're giving me fairly represents who you are, and doesn't have, and you don't really have a second like identity again. So on this idea, I think what needs to be figured out by the industry itself, and that's why we haven't really gone to market with a full identity solution, is what is the right level of incentive for people to use always the same identity. So it's not a matter of the oracle screwing up in this case, but it's a matter of convincing the user or convincing the application builder or the protocol to incentivize the user to actually use their own identity that is always the same. And I think that's the part that we're working on. It's not going to be easy, but we are seeing a desperate need for this to be built, and we're starting to invest more and more energy to be at the bottom layer of this shareable identity that avoids your problem, the problem that you highlighted, which is this oracles, because it doesn't really rely on oracles for creating this underlying identity, but it allows on a decentralized consensus that can verify this computation and can verify that whatever stays in the capsule is actually like the right type of information and is not compromised. And hacking a consensus layer on our network requires like such a great new invention that we don't see these as a strong problem right now. I want to spend 1 second on the last question we got, and then I think I need to.
So we're out of time. We try to cut stuff off at the exact time.
Sorry.
But you can follow, you can shoot him a tweet and he can follow up there.
Okay,
if you just
thanks.
want to drop your handle into the chat, that'd be great.
It's actually on the screen, but happy to.
Oh, that works too. All right, cool.
Yeah.
We're going to transition to next talk now.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.